Hey, welcome to External Monologue. So today I just wanted to talk about time traveling in Miraculous. Because there are things that I think they used wrong or in a weird way, or just some things that I noticed. Let's get into it. So one thing that I think is a bit confusing in Shot Blanc is Marinette's hair. Like, for some reason they changed it in a different timeline. I guess just to show us that it is a different timeline, but that's never really explained in the show. They kind of just did it. Like, this was supposed to happen right after Bunny showed up, or while Marinette was in the future. So it is weird that she just has a different hairstyle all of a sudden. Like, I think they did that to not have any confusion with the two timelines, but if anything, it caused even more confusion. You had one job. Another thing in Time Tagger, we don't really know his powers. Like, I would assume his power is to send people back in time, but the fact that posters and portraits start changing afterwards is a bit irritating to me. Like, if he sends them back, why are they all of a sudden in a different location? Shouldn't they be at the exact same place where they are right now, just a few years later or earlier? Like, the fact that they immediately replace some famous people, I don't know. I don't know. It's not really confusing, just irritating. To me at least. So, one thing I noticed is that Shot Blanc was inevitable. Or I guess not inevitable, but this timeline kind of led up to it. Because what Bunnix is looking at while Marinette is fighting Shot Blanc is what would have happened if she didn't intervene. So if we didn't had a time-traveling superhero, the world would have just ended right there. Which is a bit confusing, since not just have we seen future Ladybug and Cat Noir, but Bunnix itself is from the future. If the world would have been destroyed right there, Bunnix and future Ladybug and Cat Noir shouldn't exist. Which leads me to believe that Miraculous has different timelines. What this means is that there's an original timeline and a separate timeline that leads to Shut Blanc. Question is, what caused this second timeline? Well, we know that in the first timeline, Time Taggers sent Bunnix back into the past, where she gave up her Miraculous, which caused the Alex that we know to inherit the Miraculous, and bring it to Ladybug to reveal the secret message. Bunnix being in the past and causing this is what caused the second timeline to exist and Shot Blanc to happen. So it's kind of Bunnix's fault. Well, if we want to be more specific, it's Time Tagger's fault, but Bunnix is what caused this. So yeah. Now, speaking of timelines, in fiction, there are usually two different types of timelines. There's what I like to call the unchangeable timeline and the flexible timeline. Let's say two people meet. They fall in love with each other, they get married, have a child, and that child meets a time traveler or someone with a time traveling device. The kid then travels back in time and accidentally prevents his parents from meeting. Now, if we were to go with the flexible timeline, we would see something that we would see in most media when it comes to time traveling. And that is that now that the parents never met, or got married, or had a child, the kid would just start disappearing. He basically doesn't exist anymore. But I always had a problem with that. And that is that if the kid disappears and doesn't exist anymore, there's no one to go back in time and prevent the parents from ever meeting. The kid was the cause for the future of the timeline to be rewritten in a way that he doesn't exist anymore, but that means that the cause for this rewriting of the timeline disappeared, which means that now that there's no one to intervene with the timeline, everything will happen exactly how it did originally, meaning that the kid will again go back in time and prevent his parents from ever meeting, which means that he disappears again, which means that there's no one to mess with time, which means that everything will happen again, and so on and so forth. You basically have two different ways the timeline could go, but we can't have one timeline happening and then the other and then the first one, and then the second one, and then the first one, and then the second one, and so on. There needs to be a way that both of these timelines can coexist at the same time, which is where we get to the unchangeable timeline. Again, using the same example, if the kid goes back in time and prevents his parents from ever meeting, every effect that he had and every change that he made are happening in a separate timeline. The moment he arrived in the past and changed something, the timeline split, and now there's a timeline where he doesn't exist and one where he does. Now the question is, which of those two is Miraculous using? We got evidence that they're using the unchangeable timeline, like I just mentioned with future Ladybug and Cat Noir, or even the one with the hair up and the hair down, but there's also evidence for the flexible timeline, where spontaneous decisions start changing the timeline, as opposed to the timeline already having a specific future that is going to happen no matter what. Like for example, when Shotblanc almost destroyed the universe, all the different futures started disappearing until he decided not to do it. Now, with an unchangeable timeline, which has a future that is already set in stone, it would have already been clear that he wasn't gonna do it. The timeline would have known that he wasn't gonna do it. So in that moment, it seemed like the timeline was spontaneously changing. So I guess there's a bit of both. Now, speaking of spontaneously changing timelines, there's another thing that I noticed. Just something I felt like I had to mention in this video. So in the episode Shotblanc, Bunnix came to the past to talk to Ladybug because something was wrong with the future. A future that is technically Bunnix's past, except not because she's from a different timeline. It is very possible that what happened is that for Bunnix, Shotblanc happened just a few seconds after the episode Time Tagger. Like she was on her way back and then saw the one future that she technically caused, or she tried to go into the future of this timeline and it didn't exist, and so she immediately went to Ladybug. Like in Shotblanc, we don't know if Bunnix is coming from the far future or the past, that being the episode Time Tagger. We will never know. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. If you liked this video or thought it was interesting, why not leave a like or subscribe to support me. If you'd like to see more videos like this or just about Miraculous, tell me in the comments. I'm open to ideas. And I guess turning on the bell for notifications, since I don't really have a consistent schedule. And yeah, bye.